Hello and welcome to this episode of Community Voices Uganda on Civic Space TV. I am Phillip Muliisa. I welcome you all, my panelists, and indeed the viewers of this show. And today we talk about a matter very important to Uganda, but also the region, the continent, and indeed the world at large. And that is the peace in our neighboring country to the north. That is the Republic of Southern Sudan, where there is a war going on and fears that this war could actually expand and go back to the previous times of the civil war that happened between 2013 and 2018, where we saw very many people dying in that particular war. Institutions put it at around 400,000 deaths in that particular civil war. And today we see that that country is at the verge of going back to that situation. And here I want to make sense of what the situation is in Southern Sudan is, but also try to draw its impact on the peoples of that nation, on the peoples of Uganda, on the peoples of East Africa, and indeed the continent at large, but also try to create options and opinions and thoughts as to how this conflict can be concluded sustainably, because we see over time very many conversations and agreements keep being made and broken, and you will share with us your thoughts on how comprehensively and going forward we can have this war and these disagreements between the factions that are warring in that particular country come to a comprehensive agreement that shall create peace for that country and the region going forward. I am Phillip Muliisa, and on this conversation, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished citizens of this continent. I love calling them citizens of the continent of Africa, whom I will introduce, and I'll ask them to say hello to the viewers before we get into the depth of the conversation. I'll start with Mr. Julius Nkunda. He is the editor of the Voice of Muhabura in Kisoro district. Julius, greetings. You're welcome to the conversation.
Greetings to you, Mr. Muliisa. Philip, you've already introduced me. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. Maybe in 30 seconds, you could talk to us. How is Kisoro? How is the environment? In Kampala here, we're having a mix of rain and sunshine and so on. How is Kisoro?
Kisoro is okay. We are receiving refugees from the neighboring DRC. The weather is a bit calm today. We have some sunny intervals, but it's a rainy season. From December up to April, it's usually rainy season. And well, apart from the disruptions in the neighboring Eastern DRC, Kisoro is doing very well.
Thank you so much, Julius, for that update about Kisoro. And that is a very beautiful part of this country. And it's important that we get to know what happens out there. Thank you so much. The other panelist is Mr. Opio Francis. Opio is from the Kabarole Research and Resource Center, and he's the head of governance and policy there. Francis, greetings. You're welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much, moderator. And I'm happy to know that I'm actually very close to Julius. I'm at the border in Bunagana, and we're trying to respond to the refugee influx, like my colleague Julius has mentioned. So we are very happy to be on this platform, and I look forward to really interacting with the other panelists as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Opio, for that introduction. And I can see we've lost Christine. I think she has connection challenges, but we shall have her as we continue the conversation, but also other panelists that are going to join us on the conversation. Once again, I am Phillip Muliisa, and I welcome you to the conversation. And at this moment, I want us to get into our conversation. Look, the Republic of Southern Sudan, which is the youngest nation on the planet, has had conflicts after conflicts. Before it got independence, still part of the broader Sudan, but even after independence, these people have continued to fight. These people have continued to kill each other. Many things have happened in there. the leadership is consistent. You've had His Excellency Dr. General Salva Kiir Mayardit as the president of that country since independence. You've had Honorable Dr. Riek Machar as vice president. Sometimes he leaves, he's in the bush, he's in exile, he comes back, he's vice president, and many things keep happening in this country. But I know you are close to information and close to this particular matter as a journalist, as a person in research, and all the other things you do. I want to pick your thoughts on this particular conversation because we keep hearing that it is just a personal disagreement between Salva Kiir Mayardit and Riek Machar. In your view, I will start with you, Julius. What do you think are the underlying causes of conflicts in this particular country that seem not to end 10, 20 years later? Yes, Julius.
Thanks, Mr. Phillip Muliisa. Glad to be on the show once again. South Sudan is the youngest nation or country in the world. But we continue to disintegrate, stories in the war, and actually even the efforts to have peace reign in the country. On one side, I think it's about the South Sudanese people who need to come up and say, look, we are tired, we need peace. But being the youngest nation in the country, I don't, when I think about the conflict in the country, I don't look at the proxies or maybe at external issues, but I think it's an internal issue. This is a civil war, but I think it's an internal issue between these two men, between Salva Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar, and it's a conflict deep-rooted in ethnicity within South Sudanese people. But much as it's deep-rooted in the ethnicity of the Dinka and the Nuer, I don't like to think it's about the ethnic groups fighting, but I think there are these two men, Salva Kiir Mayardit and Dr. Riek Machar, who are using their ethnic groups to fight against each other. So I think it's more of a chest-thumping game. Look, I'm better than you, and then the other one also says, I'm better than you. I can use my people, I can use my ethnic group to fight against you. And I think that's all. Because when you look at when the referendum was held in 2011, I think, and 98% of the people voted to secede from Sudan, and then a new nation of South Sudan was created. I want to believe the South Sudanese people, the people who wanted the South Sudan to be an independent country, they expected much more than chest thumping and saying maybe the Dinka should be in leadership, the Nuer should be in the leadership. It was more than that. They expected a nation on the way to transformation, better services, democracy, and everything. You can name it. But then we can see the transitional government and the peace agreements that have been signed, they have not been implemented, partly because of the animosity, the enmity between these two men. So it's a question of what does Salva Kiir Mayardit want? What does Dr. Riek Machar want? I was reading, I think this week I was reading in some of the South Sudanese tabloids online, and they were saying we have soldiers, or you can call them fighters, crossing from the SPLM in opposition to SPLMA. And you wonder, all these are the people who wanted to, to break away from Sudan to form a new nation. Now, they're breaking out. So they're crossing from SPLMA in opposition to SPLM now of Riek Machar. So does it mean these two, they also want to form another nation maybe? Is there going to be another country? Are they fighting for leadership? Sometimes even wonder why one group is fighting against the other. But I think the problem, the question in South Sudan is chest thumping. It's a fight of the egos. Riek Machar and his boss Salva Kiir. It's not about the Dinka fighting the Nuer, but it's Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. So if they can settle their differences, then we'll have peace in South Sudan.
Thank you so much, Julius, for that thought, and it's a very powerful thought you give. And I want to come to you, Francis. You hear Julius tells us it's the question of chest thumping, like he calls it. Dr. Riek Machar and General Salva Kiir might add it. They can't agree on who is better and who should continue pushing things in Southern Sudan. In your perspective, and I know over the years there have been talks of the influence of the Khartoum Sudan in the Juba Sudan, but now we all know how broken the Khartoum Sudan is as well. So, in your perspective, what do you think is the underlying cause of this conflict in Southern Sudan? And certainly, is it about these two men, or it's deeper than the two men? And indeed, what Julius said, the proxies, whereas he said he cannot rely on that. Yes, Francis.
Yes, thank you so much, moderator, and thanks, Julius, for the insights that you've given. I do believe that beyond what Julius has mentioned, there are multiple layers to the conflict that we see in South Sudan, and of course, partly Julius has mentioned the political struggles between the two big wigs, if I call them that, and then the ethnic divisions between the Nuer and the Dinkas, which are clearly visible. And we can all see them from the outside. Even us who are working in humanitarian response, we clearly see that even when they are displaced and they're in refugee settlements in Uganda, there is still tension between the two. You can't definitely put a Nuer and a Dinka in the same zone, for instance, or in a same cluster when you bring them to the refugee settlements in Uganda. But that is a discussion
That's
for another
serious.
day. Yes, that's a discussion for another day. But I would like to add that, beyond that, we clearly see a weakness in the existing governance system of South Sudan. And let me expound on that a little bit. When we talk about the governance system, we are looking at the functionality of the judiciary, for instance. What is the status of the rule of law within that country? What is it that we need to look at when it comes to separation of power? Julius just mentioned how they are struggling. Each one of these political actors, each one of them wants executive dominance. One wants to rule over the other, right? So this kind of lack of separation of power really undermines the existing checks and balances that should be in existence within this particular country. Many times we have seen when it comes to governance issues, Parliament of South Sudan often just really, if I may call it, rubber stamp certain things. You clearly see that their powers are limited. They really do not have capacity to provide oversight when it comes to governance. On the question of the rule of law, the judiciary really lacks independence. You will clearly see that many of the justice questions and the human rights issues within this particular country, it's not clearly adjudicated within the rules and the peripheries of their court. Law enforcement is one thing, you know. So when you look at broadly, when you look at the issue of the conflict in South Sudan, you can really break it down to some of the weaknesses within the governance structure. We see widespread corruption. Billions of oil revenue have disappeared. We clearly know that this country that we're talking about now has a resource, which is oil. And partly that is also the other cause for this conflict, because everyone wants really to partake of the bigger cake of this particular resource. So that causes stampede, and it's causing what we are seeing right now. So when we talk about the issue of South Sudan or the question of South Sudan, it's really about layered kind of, the factors are really, really enormous and complex. There is the governance issue, there is the resource issue, there is struggle for, power like Julius mentioned, but also we see the politicization of civil service. Now, civil service in South Sudan, government appointments are based on ethnic affiliations. You mentioned the aspect of, the Nuers and the Dinkas. Who is more loyal to who? It is not based on merit. Now, that all comes into the governance question when you're looking at the broader complexity of the causes of this particular conflict. And we can, of course, unpack the causes more because the layers are enormous, like I've mentioned. But for now, let me get it back to you, moderator.
Thank you so much, sir, for that thought, and it's a very powerful one you made. And when you talk about that, it takes me to Christine here. Christine, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm getting you.
Yes, thank you so much. I understand you belong to the South Sudanese Students Association at Makerere University. I want to pick your thought on two things. First of all, what do you hear from home? What is the situation like? But two, is this conflict a conflict of the peoples of Southern Sudan, or it is just a conflict of the politicians? Take me through that lane, Christine.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Just like you introduced me. My name is Mude Christine, and I'm a student at Makerere University. And I also belong to the Association of South Sudanese here back at the university. Back to your question, what do you hear? What do I hear back from home? Yeah, of recent, we have really had a lot of tensions that are ongoing in South Sudan. And when we call back home, the first thing they tell us is this our president with firing of people without any reason. You just wake up early in the morning and then you start firing people from nowhere. So he fired Riek Machar, and it has really caused a very big issue in South Sudan. People want to have stopped going to work. People no longer work late hours. Find at around 2, maybe people close and then rush home. They don't really want to be caught off guard. The people are staying in panic, and as per now, most of the family members are already running back to Uganda. That is because they are seeing the signs of the war that happened back in 2014. They are seeing the signs of that. And when we look back into this war, it might seem to be a war of two people, but it is going to include each and every person in the country. It is not going to affect one individual. It's not going to affect maybe the president alone, but it is going to affect initially everybody. I'm going to give an example how one of my uncles was just ambushed from nowhere at home because he's a police officer and he works with the Riek Machar. He is one of the officials. They just came and ambushed him from home. Even the people at home, they were telling us that they don't really know how they were able to pick this guy from home, but the only news they had is the guy is already dead. So the family had to just go and pick the body, and they then buried the body there and then. But it was really a very upsetting news for us because one, we didn't really know how this incident happened, and up to date, people at home are still confused of how this has happened. But this still goes back to our main cause of this conflict, which is the ethnic tensions that are in South Sudan. When you look back into this, the main cause of this conflict before the agreements were put there, then the presidential positions were split to have vices from all states. It is mostly these ethnic tensions. You find the Dinka and Nuer populations are the highest populations in South Sudan, and this Dinka and Nuer have people that go behind them. You might find that the Dinkas are they are in around 5 states, and they are backed by those people. Then you come to the Nuer, the Equatorians, where I belong to. That is those are the people that do what now back them up. Now you see how this kind of division, it is going to cause social divisions within ourselves. Now from these divisions, each and every of these states have demands that they want the presidents to fulfill. And in some cases, you find like these presidents fail to fulfill those demands that they want. At the end, it brings out conflicts. You find now the IOs are very many, and they are in different states that they belong to. And these states that they belong to, they are also leaders that lead that very group. And that very group sends in orders to the presidents that they want this and this. When these people fail to fulfill their demands, that is when you see wars coming up and all that. And I'm sure Salva Kiir must have had something about something that Riek Machar is maybe planning. That is why he sacked him immediately. Some of these things are political things that we as citizens, we may not be able to see, but when you go deep to the root cause of this issue, you will find that there is something that has him to do that act of sacking people. However, it is not really something very good. If it's an agreement, it is good for us to follow the agreement in a rightful order, in the right way, so that our people can be able to understand. Because as the nature of our people, we are really not this kind of people who are all educated and can reason out. The nature of our people needs to be told very well. You find that he might have a good reason for firing somebody, but will the people understand that reason? It is good when the president also understands the kind of people that he is trying to lead, then he'll be able to act upon it. Because personally, I look at my country as a community of very rude, aggressive kind of persons. And if these people, you also lead them aggressively, we will not be able to get the peace that we really want to have in the country that we are in. So South Sudan's issue is really a very big, complex issue that really needs us to look at the root causes. That is the tensions that we have in our ethnic groups. Because as we are growing up, you find your parents telling you this particular tribe, don't even marry, don't talk to them, don't associate with them. You see that kind of attitudes that we have from our growth till, and you shall grow up with that mentality in generations to generation, and this war will not surely come to an end. Because even up to the country that we are brought in as refugees, we still want to bring that mentality back here, which is something that I don't know which kind of initiatives that can be put in place for this kind of mentality to be removed from the South Sudanese at large. I would really beg to.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine, for such a testimony. First of all, I want to say I and the team are so sorry about the loss of our dear uncle. It is very painful to hear, and please receive our sympathies. And that is something that should not happen in Southern Sudan or anywhere on this planet. Please, we are so sorry about that. But to you give us a very powerful first-hand account of what is happening on the ground, and indeed how the situation is actually like, and including mentioning things like parent to child talk that this particular tribe is bad, and make sure you don't marry from that area, and make sure you don't. Oh, it is very, very powerful and dangerous. And like you said, is something that could cause the conflict to be continuous, even as we move to 10, 20, and 30 years later after the current tensions and the current leadership. Thank you so much, Christine, for that. And I thank you so much. I think we have, is this Richard? Is it you that has just joined us? If you can say something. Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. The one who was
Thank you so much for joining us. And quickly, I want to pick your thoughts on the conflicts we hear in our neighboring country. What's your quick thought about it? Do you think it is a just what we'll be having in that country? But two, what, in your view, what are the underlying causes of this conflict? Yes, Richard.
Thank you, Philip, for welcoming me on this show. First of all, I think it's a perturbing situation going on in South Sudan. It is a very sorry state because this country has been having wars without even people resting. Another war is coming up again, and many of them are in exile because of the wars, the refugee camps spread all over the region. And when they were just beginning to think about perhaps going back to rebuild their lives, another fire has been ignited back home. I think it is a shadow situation, a situation that is disrupting people, that is leading to loss of lives and causing more people to flee from home across the borders. And it's really not a good thing to be witnessing. However, I think what is causing all this, the causes are multifaceted, deep-rooted mistrust amongst the communities because of this violence which has going on for long. You know, this had been a community that was virtually under oppression before they got their independence, and they tried to fight, and there were so many groupings that were fighting, and when they got the independence, there came that issue of jostling for leadership positions, and again, conflict erupted. And this the last one in 2013 between Macha and the president, which ignited all the ethnic tensions, leading to so many loss of lives, and the current refugee influx that we had, almost in fact, over 1 million of them being hosted in Uganda, and the others spread in the neighboring countries and so forth. And then we had the revitalized peace agreement, which was signed in 2018, which was supposed to bring these people together and end all these fightings. But now we see they are getting back to the situation of fighting, and when you look at it, I think this time it's more to do with who should be a successor in case the current president is not there. Because if you look at it, you find the president, first of all, okay, there may be economic reasons, there may be political reasons, security reasons, but the president himself, I think, has some health issues that is battling with, and this is trying to tickle people to think that maybe there's going to be a vacancy sort of coming up, and it appears the president has his preferences of who should be his successor, and he seems to be trying to create some space for that. That could be the reason behind some of the sackings and the replacements he's doing, where he's removing some opposition figures, which is not in line with the peace agreement that they signed in 2018. Is bringing all these chaos. And of course, I also don't believe that the first vice president is as popular right now as he was maybe in 2013, maybe 2018 when they signed those things. I think when he joined when he rejoined the government, there has been some tension also within the opposition circles as to what really is intentions. It will appear there are some people within the opposition who do not want to be under the current government. They just want to be leadership themselves. And all these are igniting tensions. But what is sad is the people who are suffering because of this jostling for positions are the ordinary people who actually have nothing to do with the powers that these people are struggling for. Because we see those who are in power, they're almost thinking about themselves. There's, I think, some greed which is driving some interests. We see signs of ego, which is playing out that I can be better than whoever is there. And so I think this is really a sad situation, but what it is generating is affecting not just the country, it is affecting us even in the neighborhoods because of the influence
Thank
of
you.
this. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for those thoughts. And you raise fundamental issues there that seem to be causing the disagreements and subsequently the conflicts we keep seeing in Southern Sudan. I want to come back to you, Julius. At this level, when people are fighting and there is anticipation of more and wider fight, Uganda has deployed in that country. The Uganda People's Defense Forces is present in that country. To begin with, why should Uganda deploy in Southern Sudan? And two, do you think that this deployment is going to make a move and a mark to create peace in that particular country? Is the UPDF going to take a solution in Southern Sudan? Yes, Julius.
Thanks, Phil. One, Uganda is relevant in the region. Museveni, its president, is an elder in the region, and well, some can even call him a consultant in the region in regard to leadership, and well, he's the eldest president in this region. Where if you say East African community for that matter, and there's no doubt about well, I think there's no doubt about President Museveni, the president of Uganda, having had a hand in the independence of South Sudan from Sudan Khartoum. So recently, the Minister of Defense, Obos for Uganda, said they deployed the UPDF to South Sudan on request by the South Sudanese government. And later on, we saw MK, the president's son, saying that the UPDF is in South Sudan to secure it at the request of South Sudanese President Salva Kiir. So now it remains a question of why. Now, the first question was, why is the UPDF in South Sudan? So Uganda is telling us they were invited. But now the other question would be, why should the South Sudanese government invite Uganda? Why should they appeal for support from Uganda? Why not the UN? Why not the AU? Why not the East African community? Now, is it because of the history of President Museveni of the UPDF in South Sudan? I don't know, but I think we should also look at what should we expect from this engagement of South Sudan inviting the UPDF, well, for lack of a better word, to come to their rescue. Because I've found out that this conflict started when the White Army, which is actually made of the new people, clashed with the South Sudanese army on 3rd March this year. And it actually resulted into the capture of an army barracks in a town called, I think, Nasir. So, sometimes when the Western world tries to intervene in Uganda's internal political drama, sometimes the Ugandan government says these are internal issues. So one would also wonder, why is Uganda, the UPDF, interfering with internal issues in South Sudan? Because there's no doubt, like I said,
So, Julius, if you allow me, so on that specific lane, do you think the UPDF is able to deliver peace in Southern Sudan?
Well, I think the question of peace would depend on what do the South Sudanese people want, and in this case, it would be the Dinka and the Nuer. It would be Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, but it cannot be about the UPDF, because now, if we talk about the UPDF delivering peace in South Sudan, let's look at the numbers. How many troops are? How many Ugandan troops are in Juba? Then vis-a-vis the people who would fight against them if it's about winning battles. So I want to look at, what does the South Sudanese people want? What does the government want? What the people in leadership want? Is it about chest thumping, a competition of their egos, or it's about democracy? Because one thing I want to think about also is the delay of elections. Because you remember, elections were at first slated to be held in 2022. Later on, this transitional government pushed the elections to late 2024. We're now in 2025. They said, let's postpone for more 2 years. So I'm also wondering, is Riek Machar and his group sensing maybe Salva Kiir is never going to give us leadership, and maybe we should push him to the edge? So when we talk about UPDF deploying, well, they can be there on invitation, but well, I also think there should be implementation of the peace accord signed a few years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius, for that account. Francis, I want to come back to you. Look, conflict is on. Yes, Uganda is deploying in this country, but I want you to give me what impact is created by a war in Southern Sudan to Uganda, to the region, to the peoples of South Sudan and the world. But what are the likely outcomes of a war in our neighborhood here? Yes, Francis.
Yes, thank you so much, moderator. When you are actually trying to ask the question, I was trying to jot down a few things. And for me, there are both positive and negative implications when it comes to Uganda's deployment in South Sudan. One, on the positive side, we clearly know that South Sudan is a big market when it comes to, trade. Majority of the things that are being consumed in that country, most of them come from our country, Uganda, and perhaps the neighboring East African countries as well. So the fact that South Sudan is a huge, huge market to us, given the things that we produce, I think the government of Uganda deploying in that country means that we are trying to, in a way, secure, our economic interests. Because definitely people need, the trade to continue. People need to make a living. So for me, that is a positive, because if you look at, there are instances where traders from South Sudan have been constantly ambushed especially on the, when you look at the Juba-Nimuli highway. When that happens, of course, it affects trade between the two countries. So is the deployment of our troop justifiable? When it comes to that, I think it's a big yes. And then two, the stability of our neighbor, South Sudan, if there is stability, that means we do not have a lot of refugees coming into our country. You clearly know that Uganda is hosting quite a number of South Sudanese students within our borders. Why? Because of the instability that is happening within our neighboring country. Now, is the deployment justifiable when it comes to that? I think it's a huge yes, because the more you have instability on the other side, the more you have the impact on this side of our border, because the country has to deal with the refugees. The existence of the refugees comes with a huge cost, issues of land, issues of resources. If you went to some of the refugee settlements, you'll clearly see the impact of having the refugees coming here. The forest reserves are being depleted. There are some key issues to do with land boundaries between the refugees and the host. That all comes at a cost. Now, if there is stability in that country, that means that we can actually lessen some of the implications of people coming into the country in that front. But on the other side, we also see there are some negative implications, because as a country, we clearly know that when you're deploying, it requires resources, both financial and the human resource. So deploying in that country means Uganda is going to have to invest in the troops, how they are going to survive that side. But then on the other side as well, where there is war, there are always human costs. People die. So does it mean that when they deploy, then the Ugandan troops are immune to bullets, that if they are shot at, they do not die? No. Certainly some people will die. And of course, when one person dies, it's not just one person. The person could be actually supporting thousands of people where he comes from. So that is a human-related cost. But on the other side of South Sudan as well, I think it undermines the sovereignty of the governance, the people in government. I did talk about the governance system earlier. Already, the people of South Sudan don't seem to really trust the systems that they have, right? Now, with the deployment of the troops from Uganda, that means that, look, you have an army that is non-functional. So we are here to try and save the day. So it clearly means that it's just like when you're a father in a home and you cannot provide. The children and your wife perhaps get to a point where they will tell you, no, we don't think you're man enough. So you're definitely relying on somebody else to take care of your family for you. And you do not want to be in such a position if we're to take the case of the family setting. That is the exact thing that happens when, of course, the government of South Sudan allows Uganda to deploy there. They lose the trust. It undermines the sovereignty of the country. It undermines, the credibility of the governance system within that particular country. So I think those are some of my thoughts in terms of the pros and cons when it comes to the deployment of the Ugandan troops in South Sudan. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Francis, for that, and you put it so well in that particular regard. I want to come to you, Christine. I hope you are still with me. Look,
Yes.
I want to pick your thought on the presence of, as a student in Uganda, what's your thought on the presence of Ugandan soldiers in your home country. Is it a move you support so well, and certainly why would you support it or not support it?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I'm going to answer it in two aspects, bringing out the positive aspect and also the negative aspect of it. Yes, it is true that the UPDF in South Sudan, as you can see, yesterday it was all over news how the UPDF soldiers were moving around South Sudan with the Ugandan president. It was shown all over, people started making noise. Why is Museveni taking his soldiers to South Sudan? A lot of propaganda moving around about the UPDF soldiers in South Sudan. But however, when you look at the deployment of the UPDF soldiers in South Sudan, I think our president is trying to bring stability into the country. Since just like the way my other colleague had stated it, since there is really loopholes in the SSD military. It is true that there is really loopholes in the SSD military because one, there is really poor payment, or in fact some of the military officers in South Sudan don't even get paid. That alone brings into poor service to the country, and their aim is to only survive. That is what the South Sudanese soldiers or the military are doing right now. They are not being paid, or maybe their payments accumulate over years and months, and they're not really paid. How will they be able to survive? So most of the military in South Sudan are looking for survival ways. That's why you see them maybe on the borders taxing people, looking for ways of how to survive, leaving out the main purpose of as to why they're being employed into the country. Yet they're supposed to promote security into the country. But when you look at it right now, they are deviating from that because one, they are not being able, they are not helping them to meet their needs. How will I be able to give protection to a country, yet the country itself is not paying me? It is not giving me the services that I need. So you find them going to places on how to survive basically, because you find they are living the roles that they are supposed to be assigned to. They are living the roles that they are supposed to be assigned to, and then they look for other ways of surviving. And that is one of the reasons I think Salva Kiir brought in the UPDFs in South Sudan. However much it has brought down the tension in South Sudan, you will find that the late movement, at least these days, are moving, and too much of fear has reduced because of the deployment of UPDFs in South Sudan. However, it is the citizens are asking themselves, why is this guy bringing these people in South Sudan? What is his motive? Why is he bringing these people in South Sudan? Is he planning something huge? Is he planning for a war so that these people will back him up? Is he planning for something visible to back him up, or he's trying to make the country calm down? So this is what the country hasn't really found out. The main aim, the main motive of him bringing the UPDFs in South Sudan. To some extent, you may think that maybe he wants the situation which is right now that is happening in South Sudan to calm down. But sometimes also people will think that maybe he has his own motive. Maybe that will be his backup plans when things don't go right. Maybe the military currently in South Sudan may turn against him. Then the Ugandan government, the Ugandan police would be able to back him up. That is also one of the rumors that is moving around when we call back home. So basically, to me, the deployment of UPDF, it is okay, because when you look at the UPDF soldiers, they are trained, they know what they do, and they have values that they follow, which is one thing that is missing in our, I'm sorry to note it that way, but it is one thing that is missing in our military in South Sudan. You find the UPDF know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Christine. And it is very important that you mentioned some of those things, and quite critical that you say there is a semblance of peace. People are able to continue with their business with the presence of the UPDF. And indeed, it's also true that the President of the Republic of Uganda flew to South Sudan on Thursday at the invitation of his fellow president, His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, and he's out there. So it is true that he's there. It is true that the UPDF is there, and certainly I'm sure the spokesperson of the UPDF will be so happy to hear such a testimony that the UPDF is trying to calm down the tensions in that particular country. Thank you so much for that. I want to come to you, Richard Drasmaku. Look, from West Nile, I want you to talk to me about whenever there is war in our neighboring country, and particular at this particular time. I know earlier we spoke about refugees and things related to them, land and so on, but when there is war, what do you experience at the community level there? What happens in terms of the trade, in terms of personal relations, in terms of communication? What is the situation like near the border, and what do you hear people saying about this particular situation? Yes, Drasmaku.
Yes, thanks, Philip. First of all, in Arua here, in fact, in West Nile, we eat fish from Juba, the salted fish. And when there is instability in that area, it disrupts that business. So in short, I'm saying the goods, the goods of necessity that come from South Sudan, they get disrupted, and the goods from Uganda that flow across the border, they also get disrupted. We find the cost of doing business increases, transport costs increase, and this recent chaos has already generated more influx of refugees coming across the border. Find the reception centers are once again swelling with the people. I think the authorities in Koboko are just talking of over 400 people who are there as recently as yesterday. So this kind of the instability across the border is not good for us here because the effects, and when they come like this, that means strain on the social amenities, and not all the people who come across the borders, they don't end up in the refugee camps, some remain in the urban centers, and also lawlessness across the borders, it creates a breeding ground for all the forces that are not friendly, bandits, rebels, or whatever. Until South Sudan gained its independence, we were not able to root the LRI from northern Uganda. It was until there was stability in South Sudan that these guys were pushed away from our border. They are roaming around South Africa, Republic, and so on. So the implications of instability in South Sudan, they are dire for us as a country, as the border communities, and it's not something desirable in all aspects, economic, social, and all of that.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that. You are still on Community Voices Uganda on Civic Space TV, and we are discussing the situation in Southern Sudan and what it means for the peoples of that country, the peoples of Uganda, the peoples of East Africa, and indeed the peoples of the world. And colleagues, as we get into the final 10 minutes of the conversation, I want us to speak about solutions, and certainly in this regard, starting with Julius. What should be the role of regional and international bodies like the United Nations, the African Union, the East African Community, and all these other bodies? What should be their role in trying to see that there is no conflict, that there is peace, there is growth, development, and progressiveness in this sister country, and indeed any other country that is seeing war emerging already in existence? We know we have war in the DRC, we have wars in Somalia, talk about the Central African Republic, Mali, everywhere. What should be the role of these institutions in making sure we no longer have war in these countries? Quite briefly, sir. Yes. Oh, I think we seem to have lost Julius because of connection, but he'll be joining us and we continue with him on the conversation. I'll come to you, Francis, on the same issue. The role of regional bodies. What should the East African community be doing in this particular regard? And in any case, does it have capacity to deliver peace in this particular country? Yes. In a minute or two, sir.
Yes, thank you so much, Phil. For me, from the peace building perspective, I think there is need for the regional bodies to strengthen local peace mechanisms to really help address intercommunal conflicts and promote reconciliation from the bottom up. That is one. The regional body could also try and push for the full implementation of the agreement that my colleagues have been talking about that dates way back into 2018. This will specifically really help, enhance constitutional reforms, but also ensure that there is transitional security arrangements. Because when you look at what is going on, there seems to be a lot of, back and forth, especially between different small militias that are causing insecurity within the country. The third point, I think the AU and East African community must really step up their monitoring and pressure on some of the parties that are involved in derailing peace. I think they have the mandate to do this, and they should really try and monitor, especially the implementation of some of the clauses in the agreement, but also ensure that they incentivize some of these parties to make sure that they yield to the issue of the reforms that were made. And lastly, the bodies, especially the East African community, should really invest in the young people. When you look at South Sudan, there are quite a number of young people who have the energy and they have really the zeal. They have the dream to make that country a better place. So I think the AU and all the other parties that are involved, they should really invest in young people, the youth, and really they should economically empower them. Many of these young people are drawn into conflict simply because they do not have alternatives to livelihood. I'm glad Christine is here. Christine talked about it a little bit earlier, that the poverty levels there really sometimes push these young people into these acts of violence and acts of conflict. So if we can only invest in the future of the young people of South Sudan, I think the future of South Sudan will be a bright one with the young people at the forefront. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francis, for those recommendations and thoughts. Yes, Julius, I want to pick your thoughts on what you think the role of these regional and international bodies should be, and certainly if there is capacity for them to deliver peace in any war-torn area like Southern Sudan. Yes, Julius, in a minute or two.
Oh, thank you. Well, South Sudan joined the East African community in 2016, and actually, to me, the last three countries to join South Sudan, that was to join East African community, it was South Sudan,
The DRC and Somalia.
and Somalia. You can see all the three countries where we can say they're unstable, they're infested with the conflicts. And when these countries came on board, the East African community was actually going to have a population of around 330 million, around there, to create markets, to create cooperation, and that would mean development and progress. But what we are actually seeing, it's instability, and with instability, of course, there is progress, then it comes to a standstill. President Museveni has visited Juba, and he actually went to Juba when mediators of the African Union were also had also arrived in Juba the other day, I think on Wednesday. But before I look at their efforts, I also want to look at the efforts of the East African community and the African Union in other conflicts of the same kind. When you look at the question of conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have had the Nairobi process, we have had the Rwanda process, but it seems Africa has, I don't know, maybe Africans don't believe in the African Union finding solutions to their problems. Africans think they cannot find solutions to their problems because the parties that were supposed to meet in Rwanda, Angola, to discuss the DRC problem, we saw them in Qatar. So I'm also wondering, is this team of mediators from the African Union going to really give us results? I think the issues require the South Sudanese people tell the other two men that the South Sudanese people tell Salva Kiir, tell Riek Machar, we're done with war, we're tired of war. We want peace.
Yes, Julius, what you mentioned is attractive, but look, these gentlemen we talk about have been around for some time, and I'm sure the South Sudanese have been passing this message. They have not listened. We have a similar situation in Khartoum, Sudan. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, they are fighting, killing thousands of people, thousands in exile now. People are telling them we want peace. They cannot listen. And you can have tens of examples of similar. What makes you think that today they can be told and they listen to that soft tone of telling them, please give us peace and this is what we want? Just briefly as you conclude, sir.
But exactly, that's what I'm talking about. It's not about because I'm giving an example of how the East African community has tried to mediate the problem in the DRC, and
Yes.
we've only had words, letters being written, the agreements are not implemented. So I think it's about the other two principles, because it's the fight about dominance, who dominates who. And then these two people are using their their ethnic groups now. So now the ethnic groups become the proxies for these two men with ego. So I'm saying the African Union, the East African community, and even the UN would rather pick a few presidents. Like maybe we've seen, we saw Laila Odinga visit South Sudan, although I think there was nothing tangible that really got out of that encounter. But I think with President Museveni, who has mediated, who has been at the center of a peace agreement before, and a few other leaders, maybe I think a representative of the African Union, then the EAC also can have a representative. So if they get a group and they speak to both men, Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, because those are the principles in this war. If they can be, if they can meet and harmonize something, then maybe you can see an end to this conflict, which is, of course, devastating people.
Thank you.
Lives, it means disruption of peace, it means destruction of property. So I think let's not look at the East African community as a member of, but let them appoint some mediators. Maybe something can come out of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius, for that. And I want to come to you, Richard Drasmaku. How do you think we can get this peace in Southern Sudan? Just briefly.
Yes, I think as we have seen, there have been so many responses to this conflict. from neighboring countries, from the regional bodies like EGAD, from ESC, from AU. Even the Pope has been involved in this, trying to bring together these fighting people to try to harmonize and push for peace in South Sudan. And one, we see there continues to be a cycle of violence which gets repeated. And in fact, some of the economic challenges right now, which South Sudan is facing, is because of the war which is going on in Sudan, because 90% of South Sudan's revenue has been from oil, which is exported through the pipeline which passes through Khartoum, and right now that has come to a halt. That means the government has lost 90% of the revenue to cater for the people, to even pay salaries of soldiers, of what. So there are some key things that need to be done. First of all, creating the conditions necessary to achieve economic transformation of South Sudan so that the revenue base is expanded and the government can have the flexibility to carry out development activities. And two, I think, apart from the mediation efforts which are necessary, which should continue, like someone talked about the panel of the wise, which the AU discussed there, even the efforts under the ESC chairmanship of the president of Kenya and so on. I think there needs to be pressure applied on these people, especially from outside, like for the case of that conflict in Kiev in eastern Congo. We saw some people being sanctioned and pressure being applied to ensure that people come to respect terms of peace that they agreed. I think a similar approach needs to be geared towards South Sudan to really ensure that the terms that were in the revitalized peace agreement, they are respected and fully implemented so that there is stability, there is peace and progress in that country. Anything short of that, these people will continue fighting. Maybe they just rest when they're exhausted, and once they have breathed and regained their energy, they start fighting again. So that's my view.
Thank you.
I think a little bit of pressure needs to be applied on these people, maybe from UN, from international bodies, to ensure that there is no backsliding into chaos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that. And lastly, Christine, I want to hear from you. How best do you think the people at home can be convinced and made to change their thoughts about fighting and resort to peaceful means of engaging with each other and conclusively we have peace in that beautiful country? Yes, Christine.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the views of my other colleagues that they have put into, and those are really initiatives that have been happening and are still taking on in South Sudan. And some of them have yielded really impact and is really making some people change in South Sudan. However, I'm going to bring one point that I think is very important or very key for us to. However, there is one key point that I would really want to these bodies to put, that is the emphasizing the importance of a constitution in a country. You find like South Sudan has a constitution, but really the constitution is not working. The constitution is the one that guides the country, it is the one that uplifts the country, it's the one that corrects the country when it is going wrong. And I believe if South Sudan keeps on following the constitution correctly and following its laws, I believe South Sudan will really go somewhere very far. That is one key point that I feel South Sudan can, these bodies should really bring to the people of South Sudan. Let them explain to them why the constitution is very key in a country like it. They should be able to uphold the principles, the laws that are in that constitution, and they should follow it correctly. That is when you will find that there is really going to be prevailing peace in South Sudan. But when The constitution is being neglected. People are not looking into it. Trust me. These wars are going to continue. But if we follow the constitution, I believe our country will really be somewhere. Just like the other people have said, mindset change. Yes, this is an initiative that each and every person really wants South Sudan to have. And it is something that is already taking place in South Sudan. The mindset change is going to go gradually, and people of South Sudan will change. It is a step, it is a step-by-step initiative. People will not really change in just in 1 day, in 2 days, or in one year time, but I believe there are those that are already changing with these initiatives that are being brought to South Sudan. Mindset is key thing that I feel that should really happen to the people of South Sudan. That is when you will see the peace that we really want to happen in South Sudan. Thank you, and thank you very much.
The Constitution, the Constitution, the Constitution. Christine Mude, thank you so much for your thoughts and for making time for the conversation today. I really appreciate what you've had to share with us, especially those personal first-hand experiences from back home. And indeed, we continue to say there should be peace in that particular part of the country. Christine is a student at Makerere University and a member of the South Sudanese Students Association. Mr. Julius Nkunda, editor of The Voice of Muhabura, thank you so much for your thoughts and for making time for the conversation. Mr. Francis Opio from the Kabarole Research and Resource Center, thank you so much for your views and for making time to the conversation. And indeed, Richard Drasmaku from the West Nile, thank you so much for your thoughts and for making time for the conversation. It's very amazing that I had all of you, and special thanks to you, our viewers. Thank you for keeping it Community Voices Uganda and indeed Civic Space TV. Special thanks to the technical team and special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance and all our other partners that make sure we continue moving and we continue pushing to add a voice to the growth and development of this country, this region, the continent, and indeed making sure we have responsible citizens of the world. I am Phillip Muliisa, and I shall see you next time.